A captain's word is law on the open seas. His authority is absolute, his decisions unquestionable. But what happens when that authority is fueled by raw, ugly prejudice? What happens when a decorated veteran, Captain Marcus Sterling of Horizon Luxury Lines, looks at a 17-year-old girl and sees not a passenger, but a threat? He refused to leave port. He drew a line in the sand, confident in his power. However, he didn't know that the quiet black teenager in the lounge chair, Maya Brooks, wasn't just any passenger. She held a secret, a connection so powerful that in a matter of minutes, she wouldn't just challenge his authority. She would ground his entire world. This is a story of how one girl's quiet dignity toppled an empire of arrogance. The air in the passenger boarding bridge at the port of Miami was stale, a familiar mix of recycled air conditioning and the faint salty scent of the ocean. It was the smell of transit, of temporary spaces between places. For 17-year-old Maya Brooks, it was a smell of anonymity, and she savored it. Dressed in a bright blue hoodie, dark jeans, and with a pair of well-worn Bose headphones around her neck, she blended seamlessly into the river of passengers, flowing into the belly of the massive cruise ship, the Ocean Empress. She was just another face in the crowd, a teenager heading to the Caribbean. And that is exactly how she wanted it. Her ticket, booked under the simple name M. Brooks, was for a standard interior stateroom. She didn't mind. Her adoptive father, Elias, had offered to book her a luxury suite, but she had refused. "I need to see it how everyone else does, Dad," she had explained over the phone. "No special treatment. That's the entire point." Elias Brooks, a man whose name was a whisper in the halls of finance and a thunderclap in boardrooms, had recently become the majority shareholder of Horizon Luxury Lines. The acquisition was hostile, swift and brutal. He had seen a legacy cruise line rotting from the inside out with inefficiency, and more alarmingly, a culture of customer contempt. His plan was to rebuild it from the ground up. And Maya's trip was the first secret step, a grassroots audit. She was his eyes and ears, tasked with observing everything, from the cleanliness of the lavatories to the morale of the ship's crew. As she boarded the ship, she found a spot in the main lounge. She gave a small, polite smile to the woman by the window and the man in the aisle, sliding past them to settle into her seat. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt, but they were waiting for the muster drill. She pulled out a paperback novel and settled in. The pre-departure symphony began, the clicking of overhead lockers, the murmur of 100 conversations, and the cheerful, slightly strained chimes of the public address system up in the bridge. The atmosphere was markedly different. Captain Marcus Sterling was performing his pre-departure checks, with a practiced, almost bored efficiency that came from 25 years of sailing. Sterling was a captain of the old guard. He had silver temples, a jaw that seemed permanently set in a look of mild disapproval, and a belief that he was the last bastion of true authority in an increasingly soft world. He saw the new customer is always right initiatives and diversity training seminars as insults to his profession. His second-in-command, Staff Captain Daniel Reed, was 32, half Sterling's age, and 10 times more anxious. He respected Sterling's technical skill, but was often unnerved by his captain's simmering resentment. "Last of the stragglers coming on now," Daniel said, glancing at the small monitor that showed the gangway camera. "Should be able to cast off on time," Sterling grunted, not looking up from his checklist. "Let's see if they can manage that. This generation thinks on time is a suggestion." He signed a form on his clipboard with a sharp, angry flick of the wrist. "Back in my day, we respected schedules. We respected authority." Emily Carter, the head of guest services, was at the front of the lounge, her smile a masterclass in professional warmth. She had been with Horizon Luxury Lines for a decade, and had seen her fair share of difficult captains, but Captain Sterling was in a league of his own. She had learned to manage him with a careful blend of deference and strategic avoidance. As the final passenger boarded, Emily began her head count. She walked through the lounge, her eyes scanning each row. She noticed the girl absorbed in her book. There was a quiet intensity about her, a stillness that stood out amid the travel chaos. Emily offered a warm smile as she passed. The girl looked up, her eyes bright and intelligent, and returned a small, genuine smile of her own. Just as Emily was about to signal to the embarkation staff that the ship was secure, Captain Sterling's voice crackled over the internal phone. "Emily, a word." "Go ahead, Captain," she answered, her voice professional, not over the phone. "Up here now, to the bridge." The line clicked dead. Emily sighed, the plastic smile momentarily dropping. She exchanged a look with another crew member, who gave a subtle roll of his eyes. Everyone knew what a summons from Sterling meant. She walked the length of the corridor and climbed the stairs to the bridge. The heavy reinforced door was slightly ajar. "Captain," she said, poking her head in. Sterling didn't turn around. He was staring at the same monitor Daniel had been watching earlier, which now showed a live feed of the passengers. His finger was pressed against the screen, tapping the image of a young woman in a bright blue hoodie. "That one," he said, his voice low and hard. "Who is she?" Emily was taken aback. "She's a passenger, Captain. Her name is Brooks, I believe. Boarding pass checked out. Everything is in order." Sterling finally turned, his blue eyes cold as ice chips. "She's been fidgeting, looking around. I've been watching her on the monitor. She looks nervous, suspicious." Staff Captain Daniel Reese shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had been watching the same monitor. The girl had looked around when she first sat down, the way every passenger does. She wasn't fidgeting. She was turning the page of her book. Emily knew this was a fabrication. "Captain, with all due respect, she's just reading. She seemed perfectly calm to me." Sterling's gaze hardened. "Your job is to serve drinks, Emily. My job is to assess threats, and I am telling you, I am not comfortable with that passenger on my ship." The implication hung thick and poisonous in the small bridge. He wasn't just talking about her behavior. Maya Brooks was one of only a handful of black passengers in the main lounge. Sterling's suspicion was a thinly veiled excuse, a dog whistle that Emily had heard from him before in hushed tones and bitter asides, but never so openly, never directed with such clear intent. "Captain, there is no reason, absolutely no reason to single her out," Emily said, her voice dropping, but gaining a firm, steely edge. "I will not be a part of this." "You don't have to be," Sterling snapped, his face reddening. He unbuckled his safety harness with a decisive click. "Because we are not going anywhere until she is off the ship." He stood up, his large frame filling the cramped bridge, and pushed past Emily into the lounge. The battle line had been drawn, and every passenger on the Ocean Empress voyage was now sitting directly on top of it. Maya Brooks looked up from her book, a flicker of confusion in her eyes as the imposing figure of the captain stopped directly in front of where she sat. The quiet anonymity she had cherished was about to be violently shattered. The lounge, which had been buzzing with the low hum of anticipation, fell into a confused silence. A captain emerging from the bridge was not unusual, but one who did so with a face like a thunder cloud marching down the aisle with grim purpose was a signal that something was wrong. "What city are you watching this video from, and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video." Captain Sterling stopped where Maya was, his polished black shoes almost touching the girl's feet. He ignored the other passengers on either side of Maya, his focus locked solely on her. His shadow fell across the pages of her novel. "Ma'am," he said. The word ma'am was laced with a condescending bite usually reserved for a child being scolded. "I'm going to need you to come with me." Maya slowly lowered her book. She took a moment to process the situation, her expression shifting from mild surprise to careful neutrality. She removed her headphones, letting them rest on her shoulders. "Is there a problem, Captain?" she asked, her voice calm and even. "That is what we are going to determine," Sterling replied brusquely. "Off the ship now." The businessman in the suit in the aisle looked from Sterling to Maya, his annoyance palpable. "Hey, what's going on?" "We're trying to leave here." Sterling shot him a venomous glare. "I am the captain of this ship, sir. I will handle this." "Ma'am, let's go." He gestured impatiently with his head toward the ship's exit. Maya didn't move. She met his gaze directly, and for the first time Sterling saw not the nervous teenager he had imagined, but a young woman of formidable composure. "Captain," she said, her voice still quiet, but now carrying a weight that made nearby passengers lean in to listen. "You haven't stated a reason for this request. Am I being removed from this voyage?" "You are being asked to disembark for a security screening," Sterling lied, his voice rising in volume. He was used to immediate, unquestioning obedience. This quiet resistance was infuriating him. "Your behavior was deemed suspicious." A small scoff escaped from a nearby passenger. The word suspicious echoed in the now silent lounge. Everyone had seen Maya. She had boarded, sat down, and opened a book. The only suspicious thing about her, it seemed to many, was the color of her skin. Emily Carter had followed Sterling into the lounge. She stepped forward, placing herself slightly between the captain and the seated teenager. "Captain Sterling," she said, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "You can't do this. You have no grounds." "I have every ground," he boomed, turning on her. "It's called my authority as officer in command. Now get out of my way or I'll have you written up for insubordination." The threat was real. A write-up from a senior captain could be a career killer. But Emily saw Maya's face, calm and resolute, and she saw Sterling's twisted with an ugly, irrational anger. She held her ground. "You'll have to go through me then," Emily said, her voice no longer a whisper. It was clear and strong. "Because I will not stand here and watch you harass a passenger." The lounge erupted in murmurs. Phones were starting to emerge, the small red dots of recording lights winking on like fireflies in the dim light. Staff Captain Daniel Reed watched the entire scene unfold on the bridge monitor, his stomach churning. He knew what Sterling was doing was wrong. It was a gross abuse of power, a blatant act of prejudice. Every instinct screamed to him to intervene, to get on the public address system and countermand his captain. But fear held him in place. Sterling was a legend at the company, a man with friends in high places. To cross him was to commit career suicide. So Daniel just sat there, a silent, ashamed witness. Down below, Maya slowly began to gather her bag. But she wasn't surrendering. She was taking control. She stood up, a slender figure who nonetheless seemed to command the space around her. She was several inches shorter than Sterling. Yet she looked him directly in the eye without looking away. "Fine," she said. "Let's talk about my suspicious behavior. Please tell me exactly what I did." She gestured to the passengers around her. "Tell all of us what was the threat I posed by reading a novel." Her challenge hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Sterling was caught. He had expected tears, fear, a quick and quiet removal. He had not expected this articulate, fearless defiance. His fabricated excuse was crumbling under the barest scrutiny. He fell back on his only remaining defense: brute authority. "I don't have to explain myself to you." He spat, his face inches from hers. "You are a security risk on my ship. You are getting off the ship willingly, or I will have port security drag you off. It's your choice." The threat was ugly and public. The businessman who had initially been annoyed by the delay was now looking at Sterling with disgust. "For God's sake, man. She's a kid with a book. Leave her alone. This doesn't concern you," Sterling roared, his composure completely shattered. He pointed a trembling finger at Maya. "Off now." It was then that Lisa, the embarkation agent, appeared at the door, her face a mask of anxiety. "Captain, we have a problem. Departure is delayed." "What is the situation?" Sterling turned, seeing her as an instrument for his will. "The situation is that I am removing a passenger. Have security meet me at the gangway." Maya looked past Sterling's enraged face, past Emily's protective stance to the embarkation agent. She took a single deliberate step into the aisle. She wasn't moving toward the exit. She was claiming the territory. "My name is Maya Brooks," she said, her voice carrying through the lounge. "I am a ticketed passenger on this ship, and I have done nothing wrong. This captain is attempting to remove me from this ship based on what I can only assume is personal prejudice. I will not be disembarking." She then looked directly at Sterling, a flicker of something cold and powerful in her eyes. "But I assure you, Captain, you will not be sailing the ship today." It was a declaration of war. A 17-year-old girl had just challenged the absolute authority of a veteran ship captain, in front of his crew and hundreds of passengers. To Sterling, it was an unimaginable affront. To Maya, it was simply the consequence of a line being crossed and in her pocket. Her phone was silent, but she could already feel the reassuring weight of the single contact stored in her favorites. Elias Brooks. The real power had not yet entered the fight, but the call was about to be made. The lounge of the Ocean Empress became a pressure cooker. The air, already heavy, felt charged with a volatile tension. Passengers were no longer just annoyed. They were taking sides. A young man was live streaming the event, his phone held high, providing a hushed, breathless commentary. An older woman was loudly demanding to know if they would miss their connecting tours. The businessman who had first defended Maya was now arguing heatedly with another passenger, who was shouting, "Just listen to the captain and get off the ship." In the middle of it all stood Maya, an island of calm in a sea of chaos. She had not moved from where she stood. Her posture was relaxed, but her presence was immovable. Captain Sterling, on the other hand, was vibrating with rage. Maya's public defiance had stripped him of his authority more effectively than any corporate reprimand ever could. He saw her not as a person, but as the embodiment of everything he despised. A challenge to his world order? "Lisa, did you hear me?" Sterling yelled toward the gangway door. "Get port authority down here now. I want this woman arrested for interfering with the crew." Lisa, the embarkation agent, was trapped. Her manual dictated that she follow the captain's orders, but her conscience and the dozen phone cameras pointed in her direction screamed otherwise. "Captain, perhaps we should de-escalate. We can talk about this on the gangway." "The time for talking is over," he bellowed. It was then that Maya took out her phone. The simple act seemed to cut through the noise. All eyes went to the device in her hand. Sterling scoffed. "Who are you calling? You're a lawyer?" "It's too late for that." Maya ignored him. She scrolled to a single entry in her contacts: Dad. She pressed the call button. She didn't put the phone to her ear. Instead, she held it in her palm, looking at the screen as it rang. 1 second. 2 seconds. He answered. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She simply angled the phone slightly, allowing its microphone to capture the toxic atmosphere of the lounge. Sterling's continued shouting, the passengers' arguments, Emily's attempts to calm the situation. She let the phone listen for a full 30 seconds, a silent, damning testimony. Then she brought it to her ear. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Sorry to bother you at work." A brief pause. "Yes, I'm on the ship. Voyage number 821 in Miami." Another pause as she listened. "Well, there's a small issue with the captain. His name is Marcus Sterling." She looked directly at the captain as she said his name, her eyes holding no fear. "He's refusing to leave port because he says I'm a security risk." "Yes, that's exactly what he said." Sterling watched the exchange with a sneer. He assumed she was calling her father to complain. A futile gesture. He was the law here. No phone call to a concerned parent was going to change that. Maya listened for another moment, a flicker of a sad smile on her face. "Okay, I understand." "No, I'm perfectly safe. The head of guest services, Emily, has been very professional." She nodded. "Okay, I'll wait. Love you, too." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. The entire exchange had taken less than a minute. She looked at Sterling. "My father is going to make a few calls," she said simply. "I suggest we all wait." This was to Sterling the height of absurdity. "Your father?" He laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Your father? Who is your father?" "The president." "Let me tell you something, young lady. I don't care if your father is the CEO of this cruise line. On this ship I am God." It was a shocking, hubristic declaration, and it was the last mistake he would make. As the captain of Horizon Luxury Lines, the standoff solidified. Sterling, refusing to back down, ordered all crew to remain at their stations. He wouldn't sail with her, but he wouldn't let anyone else leave either, effectively holding the passengers hostage to his ego. He retreated to the galley, arms crossed, fuming as he waited for the port authority officers he was sure would vindicate him. Emily Carter stayed with Maya, bringing her a bottle of water. "Are you all right?" she whispered. "I'm fine," Maya answered, giving her a grateful look. "Thank you for standing up for me." "That took courage. It's my job to protect my passengers," Emily said, "from any kind of threat." The unspoken words, even the captain, hung between them. Minutes stretched into an eternity. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The ship door remained open to the gangway, and the air inside grew hot and stuffy. Lisa, the embarkation agent, kept getting frantic calls on her radio, her face growing more and more pale. The expected port authority officers never arrived. Instead, Lisa's radio crackled with a different kind of message, one from much higher up the chain of command. Her eyes widened as she listened. She looked from her radio to Captain Sterling and then to the calm, waiting girl in the aisle. She walked hesitantly toward the captain. "Captain Sterling, a call for you from Mr. Cole, the chief of operations at corporate." Sterling smirked, vindicated. Finally, the top brass were calling to back him up. He snatched the radio from her hand. "Sterling here." The voice on the other end was tiny but frantic. "Marcus, what in the hell is going on in Miami? I've got the entire executive board lighting up my phone." "Just a minor security issue, Robert," Sterling said, his voice oozing confidence. "A non-compliant passenger. I'm having her removed. The situation is under my control." There was a pause, and then Robert Cole's voice came back, stripped of all collegiality. It was cold, terrified. "Marcus, listen to me very, very carefully. Who is the passenger you are trying to remove?" "Her name is Brooks. Maya Brooks, some entitled teenager who thinks she's a coup." Cole cut him off with a strangled cry. "Oh my God, Marcus, you fool. Do you know who that is? Do you have any idea who you just picked a fight with?" Sterling's confidence began to waver, a small crack in his arrogant facade. "She's a passenger, Robert. That's all that matters." "No, that's not all that matters," Cole shrieked through the radio, his voice cracking with panic. "Marcus, you need to apologize to that young woman right now. You need to get back into that bridge and get that ship moving. Or so help me God, your career is over." Sterling stood frozen, the radio clutched in his hand. The ground was shifting beneath his feet. The world, he understood, a world of hierarchies and unquestioned authority, was tilting on its axis. He looked over at Maya, who was now quietly talking with Emily, and for the first time, a seed of genuine fear began to sprout in his gut. But before he could process the COO's panicked order, before he could even begin to formulate an apology, it was already too late. The dominoes had been pushed, and halfway across the country in a sleek Chicago high-rise, a man named Elias Brooks had just hung up the phone with his legal team and was dialing his new chief of operations with a single chilling directive. The problem was no longer about one girl on one ship. It was about to become about every single ship in the Horizon Luxury Lines fleet. The Horizon Luxury Lines corporate headquarters in Chicago was a monument to modern maritime operations. A massive real-time map of the United States and surrounding oceans covered one entire wall of the central operations center, dotted with hundreds of tiny ship-shaped icons, each representing a voyage at sea. It was the nerve center of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, a place of controlled, predictable chaos. Robert Cole, the chief of operations, was a man who thrived on that control. He was a master of logistics, a conductor orchestrating a complex ballet of captains, ships, and passengers across 3 time zones. But the call he received at 10:17 a.m. shattered that control completely. The caller ID simply read, E. Brooks. Cole's blood ran cold. Elias Brooks, the reclusive, terrifyingly efficient billionaire who had just bought the cruise line, never called him directly. Communications went through layers of assistants and executive vice presidents. A direct call was the corporate equivalent of a nuclear alarm. Mr. Brooks, Cole said, his voice betraying a tremor. To what do I owe the? Shut up and listen, Robert. Elias's voice was unnervingly calm, a quiet razor blade that promised a lethal cut. I have my daughter on the phone. She is on voyage 821 in Miami, sitting at the dock. Her name is Maya. She tells me your captain, a man named Marcus Sterling, is refusing to leave port because she is, and I quote, a security risk. Is this an accurate summary of the situation? Cole's mind raced. Brooks had a daughter. It wasn't public knowledge. The billionaire was fiercely private. He frantically typed Voyage 821 into his terminal. The incident report from the embarkation agent popping up. Passenger dispute. Captain invoking authority. Security requested. It was all there, Mr. Brooks. I see the report. I can assure you we are handling. You are handling nothing. Brooks cut in, his voice dropping even lower, colder. You are allowing a bigoted employee to harass a 17-year-old girl in front of a shipload of people. You are allowing your captain to publicly abuse a customer who also happens to be my child. This is not a customer service issue anymore, Robert. This is a demonstration of the corporate rot I was hired to excise. Cole was sweating now, his tailored suit suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. Sir, I am so sorry. I will call Sterling immediately. I will have him apologize. We'll get the ship moving. I will handle Captain Sterling personally. He will be severely reprimanded. There was a long, terrible silence on the line. On the operations wall, the icon for Voyage 821 blinked innocently in Miami. No, Robert. Elias Brooks said finally. You won't. Captain Sterling's employment is terminated. Effective immediately. That's the first step. But that is not sufficient. A reprimand is not sufficient. An apology is not sufficient. I didn't buy this cruise line to trim the hedges. I bought it to burn out the disease. Today we perform surgery, sir. What are you asking me to do? Cole whispered, already knowing the answer would be something unimaginable. I want you to anchor the fleet. The words didn't register at first. I'm sorry, sir. Anchor the ship. No, Robert. Elias's voice was now utterly devoid of emotion. The voice of pure unassailable power. Anchor the fleet. Every single Horizon ship on the ocean or in port. I want every voyage in the United States to be issued a directive. If you are at port, you do not leave. If you are at sea, you proceed to the nearest suitable port and anchor, effective immediately. No exceptions. Robert Cole felt the world drop out from under him. Mr. Brooks, respectfully, that's impossible. That's hundreds of voyages, tens of thousands of passengers. It will cost tens of millions of dollars. The logistical nightmare, the media. It will be catastrophic. The catastrophe already happened, Robert. It happened in the lounge of your ship in Miami. The cost of this action is a rounding error compared to the cost of allowing this culture to persist. You have 2 minutes to issue the order. If I do not have confirmation that the order has been given in 2 minutes, I will call the board and have you replaced with someone who will. The clock is ticking. The line went dead. Cole stared at his phone, his hand shaking. He looked at the giant map on the wall, at the hundreds of tiny ships charting their courses across the ocean. He was being asked to pull the plug on the entire system to stop the heart of the company. It was insane. It was corporate suicide. But the alternative, defying Elias Brooks, was personal suicide. He knew Brooks was not bluffing. With a trembling hand, he slammed the red button on his console, the one reserved for national emergencies like a terrorist attack. The operations floor, which had been a hive of calm activity, fell silent. Every controller and dispatcher turned to look at him. This is Cole, he said, his voice speaking into the command microphone that broadcast to the entire center. By executive order of the chairman, issue a level 1 fleet-wide stop. I repeat, all Horizon Luxury Lines voyages are to be halted effective immediately. All ships at sea are to divert and anchor at the nearest port. This is not a drill. Panic erupted. Shouts of what? And are you serious? Filled the room. The lead traffic controller ripped off his headset. Robert, you can't. We have ships in the middle of the ocean. We have ships approaching the port of Los Angeles. You have your orders. Cole roared, his own panic turning to desperate anger. Execute them now. Back on Voyage 821, the atmosphere had become a bizarre waiting game. Captain Sterling was still fuming in the galley, refusing to acknowledge Cole's panicked order on the radio, convinced it was a bluff. He was waiting for security to arrive and prove him right. Maya was back in her seat, the paperback open on her lap, though she wasn't reading. She was listening to the sounds of the port outside, waiting. Then a new sound began. The unmistakable ping of text message alerts. One phone, then another, then 5, then dozens. Passengers were looking at their phones with bewildered expressions. The man in the aisle next to Maya gasped. My wife. She's on a ship departing from Denver. She just texted me. Her ship is turning around and docking in New Orleans. A woman across the aisle looked up from her screen, her face pale. My tour connection in Chicago. It just got cancelled. They're telling everyone to disembark. Whispers turned to a roar of confusion. News alerts began to flash across screens. Horizon Luxury Lines grounds entire U.S. fleet. Chaos at ports. Horizon Luxury Lines voyages are halted nationwide. Captain Sterling finally emerged from the galley, his face a mask of disbelief. What is this nonsense? He demanded. It was Lisa, the embarkation agent, who delivered the final blow. She walked onto the ship, holding her company-issued tablet, her hand shaking so badly she could barely hold it steady. She didn't look at Sterling. She looked at Maya with a newfound expression of sheer, unadulterated awe. Captain Sterling, she said, her voice trembling. It's over. They've stopped everything. Every single ship. The order came from the chairman's office. They said the reason for the halt was a catastrophic failure of company culture. Originating on Voyage 821, Sterling stared at her. Then his eyes darted to Maya, the quiet teenager in the bright blue hoodie, the girl with the phone, the one who had called her dad. The sneer, the arrogance, the righteous fury, it all evaporated from his face, replaced by a dawning, sickening horror. He finally understood. He hadn't picked a fight with a passenger. He had picked a fight with the man who owned the ocean he sailed in. And in that moment, he knew with chilling certainty that he was already a ghost. He would never sit in the captain's seat of a cruise ship again. The god of Voyage 821 had just been struck down by a power he couldn't even comprehend. The command to anchor the entire Horizon Luxury Lines fleet rippled across the nation. Like a shockwave. At first, it was met with disbelief. Port authorities and traffic control centers from Seattle to Miami were flooded with confused calls from Horizon captains. Confirm last directive. Did you say anchor the fleet? The answer was always the same, affirmative. Horizon 889. Divert to nearest suitable port. Acknowledge. Chaos bloomed in ports nationwide. Ships bound for Atlanta or nearby major ports suddenly powered down their engines, creating a logjam that would take days to clear. In Los Angeles, passengers on a fully boarded ship to Hawaii were told to disembark with no explanation, their dream vacations evaporating at the dock. Horizon terminals in Chicago and Miami became a vortex of screaming children, furious business travelers, and overwhelmed gate agents who could only offer a helpless were awaiting more information. The financial and logistical cost was staggering. Every minute the fleet was at the dock, Horizon Luxury Lines hemorrhaged hundreds of thousands of dollars in fuel, port fees, crew salaries, and rebooking costs. The stock, which had surged after Elias Brooks' acquisition, began to plummet in after-hours trading as news of the unprecedented shutdown hit Wall Street. The media frenzy was instantaneous. News helicopters hovered over the port of Miami. Their cameras zoomed in on the single stationary ship at the center of it all, Voyage 821. On board that ship, the passengers were no longer just participants. They were witnesses to history. They watched as the news alerts on their phones confirmed what was happening. Their localized drama had become a national crisis. Their gazes shifted constantly to Maya Brooks, who sat quietly by the window now, the island middle seats beside her empty as people gave her a wide, respectful berth. She was no longer just a girl who had been wronged. She was the cause, the epicenter of the earthquake. Captain Marcus Sterling was a man hollowed out. The color had drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty gray pallor. He stood in the aisle, the tablet with the news alert still clutched in his hand, his knuckles white, his entire world built on a foundation of seniority, authority, and perceived superiority, had been demolished in less than an hour by a quiet teenager and her father. Corporate security, not the Port Authority police he had demanded, finally arrived. They were two men in sharp suits, their faces grim and professional. They bypassed the passengers and crew, walking directly to Sterling. Captain Sterling, the lead agent, a man named Agent Miller, said, his voice low and devoid of any warmth. We need you to come with us. Please collect your personal belongings from the bridge. Sterling didn't respond. He seemed to be in a state of shock. Your bag, Captain, Agent Miller repeated. A little firmer this time, slowly, as if moving underwater. Sterling turned and walked toward the bridge. His swagger was gone. His shoulders were slumped. Every eye in the lounge followed his slow, defeated march. Staff Captain Daniel Reed was standing just outside the bridge door, his face a miserable portrait of shame and regret. He wouldn't meet Sterling's eyes. Sterling brushed past him without a word, grabbed his bag, and walked back out as the security agents escorted him to the door. Sterling paused one last time and looked at Maya. His eyes were a storm of confusion, hatred and a desperate unspoken question. Why? Maya met his gaze. There was no triumph in her expression, no satisfaction, only a profound, weary sadness. She gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of her head as if to say, "It didn't have to be this way." He was escorted off the ship and down the gangway, a fallen king leaving his castle for the last time. The moment the door hissed shut behind him, a collective sigh of relief seemed to pass through the lounge. An announcement came over the public address system, not from the crew, but from a canned corporate recording. "Ladies and gentlemen, we sincerely apologize for the disruption. This voyage has been cancelled. All Horizon Luxury Lines operations have been temporarily suspended. Please disembark in an orderly fashion. Ground staff will assist you with rebooking and accommodations." As the passengers began to file out, tired and bewildered, Emily Carter approached Maya. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "I've never seen anything like this." Maya finally allowed herself a small, tired smile. "You were amazing, Emily," she said, her voice sincere. "You were the only one. It was the right thing to do." Emily replied, though she was still reeling. "What happens now?" "Now," Maya said, looking out the window at the flashing lights of news vans gathering on the tarmac. "The hard part begins. Now we fix it." Minutes later, a special black car pulled up directly on the tarmac next to the ship, a breach of protocol only possible with the highest level of clearance. As Maya disembarked, a member of Elias Brooks' personal security team met her at the bottom of the stairs. He led her to the car, shielding her from the prying lenses of the news cameras. As the car pulled away, Maya looked back at the grounded massive ship. It looked like a beached whale, inert and powerless. The cruise line's name, Horizon, was painted in bold blue letters on its funnel. A bitter irony. One man's prejudice had brought the entire company to its knees. The unraveling was complete. Now came the reckoning, and for Marcus Sterling. The karma was just beginning to gather its formidable strength for Marcus Sterling. The fall was not a gentle slope. It was a cliff edge. He was escorted by corporate security to a sterile windowless room. In the Horizon Luxury Lines administrative offices at the port, he was not questioned. He was not debriefed. He was simply handed a single-page letter by a stone-faced human resources executive. The letter was brutal in its efficiency. It stated that his employment with Horizon Luxury Lines was terminated, effective immediately for gross misconduct, endangerment of company reputation, and violation of the company's code of conduct and anti-discrimination policies. His final paycheck would be mailed. His health insurance would expire at midnight. Security would escort him to his car. He was to never again set foot on Horizon Luxury Lines property. But that was just the beginning. Elias Brooks was not a man who believed in half measures. He understood that simply firing Sterling was not enough. Sterling had to be made into an example, a corporate cautionary tale written in stone. The next morning, Horizon Luxury Lines, under the direct guidance of Brooks' legal team, filed a formal report with the Maritime Authority. The report was meticulously detailed, including sworn notarized statements from Emily Carter, Staff Captain Daniel Reed, who after a long night of soul-searching had decided to tell the absolute truth, to save what was left of his conscience and career, and over a dozen passengers. It also included links to the viral videos of the confrontation, which had by then been viewed millions of times. The report didn't just cite a customer service dispute. It formally accused Captain Sterling of creating a hostile and dangerous situation on his ship, through reckless and discriminatory behavior, a serious violation of maritime regulations regarding the duties of a captain in command. The authority launched an immediate investigation. Sterling's captain's license was suspended pending the outcome. This was the true kill shot. A fired captain could eventually find work at a smaller, less reputable cargo line. A captain with a suspended or revoked license was a pariah. He couldn't even pilot a single-engine boat for a weekend hobby. His wings had been clipped permanently. Sterling hired a lawyer, a bombastic man who promised to fight back, to sue for wrongful termination, to claim Sterling was the victim of a corporate witch hunt. They held a press conference. Sterling, looking haggard and defeated, read a prepared statement claiming his actions were based purely on security concerns, and that the passenger's identity was irrelevant. The public didn't buy it. The videos were too damning. His own words, "I am God on the ship" were played on a loop on every news channel. The media, fed information by Brooks' ruthlessly efficient PR team, dug into Sterling's past. They found a history of minor complaints, mostly from female crew members and minority officers, all previously dismissed by a complacent old boy club management. The narrative was set. Marcus Sterling was not a victim. He was a relic of the bygone era of prejudice and unchecked power. His life disintegrated. His wife, a woman who had built her social standing on being a captain's wife, was humiliated. The country club they belonged to quietly suggested they resign their membership. His friends, many of them fellow captains, distanced themselves, afraid of being tainted by association in the new zero-tolerance Horizon luxury lines. He was financially ruined, his legal bills mounted, and with his income gone and his reputation destroyed, he was unemployable. The man who had commanded a 100,000-ton vessel found himself unable to command the respect of a checkout clerk at the grocery store. The karma, however, was not just about Sterling's destruction. It was also about the elevation of others. Emily Carter was called to the Chicago headquarters. She walked into the meeting expecting a formal reprimand for defying her captain. Instead, she found herself sitting across a boardroom table from Elias Brooks and Maya. Brooks was an intense, imposing figure, but he spoke to her with genuine respect. "Miss Carter," he began, "what you did on that voyage, defending a passenger against your superior at personal risk, that is the true culture of Horizon. That is a standard." He then offered her the position of Vice President of In-Service Training, a massive promotion. Her first task was to personally oversee the design and implementation of a new mandatory conflict resolution and de-escalation program for all 30,000 Horizon Luxury Lines employees to be named the Carter Initiative. She was no longer just a head of guest services. She was a leader tasked with ensuring that what happened on Voyage 821 would never happen again. Staff Captain Daniel Reed was not fired. His inaction was noted, but his subsequent full honest cooperation with the investigation was valued. He was placed on administrative leave and required to complete the first session of the new Carter Initiative. He returned to the bridge months later, a changed man, humbled, more aware, and determined to never again be a silent bystander to injustice. Horizon Luxury Lines remained anchored for a full 72 hours. It was an unprecedented, financially devastating move that became a legend in business schools. But it worked. When the voyages resumed, the message was crystal clear to every single employee. The old way of doing things was over. The company was now built on a foundation of respect, and the cost of violating that foundation was absolute for Sterling. The final crushing blow came 6 months later. The Maritime Authority concluded its investigation. His captain's license was not just suspended, it was permanently revoked. The reason cited was a demonstrated lack of sound judgment and moral character required to hold the public trust as a transport captain. The news found him working as a dispatcher for a small, local trucking company, earning 1/10 of his former salary. He was a ghost in a headset, routing trucks through the night. A man who once commanded the seas, now confined to a dingy fluorescent-lit office. He had refused to share his small piece of the sky and sea with a teenage girl, and in return karma had taken the entire ocean away from him forever. 1 year later, the new Horizon Luxury Lines was almost unrecognizable from its former self. The stock had not only recovered but had soared to new heights. Passengers, won over by the company's dramatic and public commitment to customer respect, had returned in droves. The cruise line became a case study in radical corporate transformation. The grounding, once seen as a catastrophic act of self-destruct, was now hailed as a masterstroke of rebranding. The Carter Initiative was a resounding success. Emily Carter, now a respected executive, had revolutionized the training, shifting the focus from rigid procedure to empathetic problem-solving. Horizon became known for having the best-trained, most empowered in-service crews in the industry. Maya Brooks chose not to fade into the background. Deeply affected by her experience, she deferred her college acceptance for a year. With her father's full backing, she established the Horizon Foundation, a nonprofit wing of the cruise line dedicated to providing scholarships and training for aspiring sailors and captains from underrepresented communities. She wanted to ensure the future of maritime travel looked more like the passengers it served. The story closes at a Horizon dock in Miami, where the foundation is celebrating its first class of scholarship recipients. It's a diverse, brilliant group of young men and women, their faces bright with hope, all standing before a gleaming new ship. Maya, now 18, stands at a podium addressing the crowd of new students, families, and media. She is no longer the anonymous girl in a hoodie, but she hasn't adopted the stiff persona of a corporate heir either. She is poised, her voice filled with a quiet passion that commands attention. A year ago, She begins on a ship just like this one. A man drew a line. He decided who belonged and who didn't. He decided his power gave him the right to judge, to exclude, and to humiliate. He thought he was defending his world. But his world was small, and it was fragile, and it was built on fear. What he failed to understand is that the ocean doesn't belong to any one person. It belongs to everyone. It is the great connector, the place of infinite possibility. She gestures to the aspiring captains behind her. The real power isn't in keeping people out. It's in lifting people up. That's what we are going to do today. We are not just launching careers. We are launching a new idea of what it means to rise together. As applause echoes through the cavernous dock, the camera finds a final distant shot. A local news report is playing on a small dusty television in the break room of a trucking depot. It shows Maya at the podium, a confident young leader. A man in a greased uniform watches the screen for a moment. It's Marcus Sterling. He looks older, his face etched with bitterness and regret. He sees a world that moved on without him. The industry that he loved now being shaped by the very girl he tried to cast out. He doesn't say a word. He just turns away from the screen, picks up his headset, and disappears back into the anonymous drone of his new life, forever grounded. The world had ascended, leaving him far, far below. The story of Maya Brooks and Marcus Sterling is a powerful reminder that true authority isn't found in a title or a uniform, but in character and integrity. One man's prejudice born from arrogance created a storm that brought an entire cruise line to a standstill. But from that chaos, one young woman's quiet courage and one leader's decisive action sparked a revolution of accountability. It shows that no one is too powerful to face the consequences of their actions, and that the karma that follows is as swift and sure as gravity itself. This wasn't just about one voyage. It was about the direction of our entire society. If this story of dramatic justice resonated with you, please help us share it. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories, where karma delivers the final unforgettable verdict. What did you think of Elias Brooks' extreme measures? Let us know in the comments below.